In Joel chapter 1, the prophet states, "Put on sackcloth, you priests, and mourn. Wail, you who minister before the altar. Come, spend the night in sackcloth, you who minister before my God. For the grain offerings and drink offerings are withheld from the house of your God. Declare a holy fast, call a sacred assembly, summon the elders and all who live in the land to the house of the Lord your God, and cry out to the Lord." Now he's counseling sackcloth, wailing, and fasting. In chapter 2, he goes on, "Even now declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting and weeping and mourning. Rend your hearts and not your garments. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love, and he relents from sending calamity." And Joel is doing two things. He's announcing God's impending judgment, but also in doing so, he's calling for repentance. Now, the word for return in Hebrew, which shows up twice here, is the same word for repentance. It's to turn around, to come back. Now, unlike many of the other prophets, Joel doesn't spend much time cataloging Israel's sin here. But he does suggest why the issue is so urgent. Calamity is coming. Do you want to know what event is to bring about such repentance? Well, locusts. Back to Joel chapter 1, what the locust swarm has left, the great locusts have eaten. What the great locusts have left, the young locusts have eaten. What the young locusts have left, other locusts have eaten. But these aren't just any locusts. In verse 6, we're told a nation has invaded my land. A mighty army without number. It has teeth of a lion and the fangs of a lioness. Now, how about this description in chapter 2? They have the appearance of horses. They gallop along like cavalry with a noise like that of chariots. They leap over the mountains like a crackling fire consuming stubble, like a mighty army drawn up for battle. Does that sound familiar to you? I mean, last time we read the locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. On their heads they wore something like crowns of gold, and their faces resembled human faces. Their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the thundering of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. And what John saw in Revelation 9 was horrendous. I mean, were we to see one of these creatures today, much less an army of them so numerous that it blocked out the sun, well, I can't even imagine what we would do. And there are differences between John's vision and Joel's words, but the connection is unmistakable. It's so unmistakable that we ought to allow the context or purpose of Joel's to inform us as to the purpose in John's. That is, when Joel warned about the coming of these beastly locusts, it was not simply out of God's wrath, but out of his gracious compassion and desire for our repentance. When they show up again in Revelation, when we see the same thing, we should not conclude that God has changed. Rather, that here also is a legitimate warning and opportunity. God is slow to anger, abounding in love, and desirous of our repentance. Is a picture in Revelation 9 terrifying? You bet it is. Because sin is terrible. But behind it all is a God who wants nothing more than that we would turn to him. Have a blessed week.